Would you fake your death just to see real faces of people around you? I did. For years, my family couldn't be bothered to remember the one day that mattered to me, not even a lousy text. But when they thought I died and started circling like vultures over my fortune, I gave them a funeral they'd never forget. I'm Ethan, 35, and for most of my life I waited for a birthday wish that never came. My parents, Marla and Rick, treated my birthdays like a background detail while my sister Danny and brother Chase got cake, presents, and hugs every single year. I stopped expecting anything and focused on building a life they'd regret ignoring. So let's dive into it. I remember my 10th birthday like it was yesterday because it was one of the few I actually noticed. The day started okay enough. I woke up and walked downstairs expecting something. Hell, I didn't even care if it was a party or not. I just wanted a text, a card, anything. But the house was empty. No balloons in the living room. No decorations. No sound of my parents getting ready for a celebration. Just silence and the faint hum of the refrigerator. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a single, sad cupcake Marla had picked up in a drugstore on the way to work. It was half-melted, smeared with too sweet frosting, and the candle was crooked. I thought she might notice after she got home. But by lunchtime, I was alone with the cupcake and nothing else. No happy birthday, sweetie. No brother barging in to tease me. Not even Chase tossing his video game controller aside to say something. It didn't happen. I'm not a dramatic kid. I didn't throw a tantrum. I didn't cry. I just ate the cupcake in silence and tried to convince myself it was fine. That my family loved me and they were just busy. That next year would be better. I was, after all, only 10. Kids are supposed to forgive and forget. By 13, I learned how to forgive and forget such bullshit. That was the year Danny got a full-blown party with 24 classmates, a magician, and a professional photographer. Instagram-worthy stuff. Meanwhile, I got a generic card from Marla with the same cursive writing she used for Chase's and Danny's. The card said, "Hope you have a wonderful day," which was copied and pasted from the bargain shelf. Same phrase every other parent in the suburb used. No call, no dinner, no real effort. Chase and Danny got everything. At 16, I snapped. I asked at dinner why there wasn't a dinner. My voice trembled. Marla and Rick exchanged glances, and whoever got to speak first said I was too needy, dramatic, sensitive. Rick leaned back and said birthdays aren't that big a deal. That if I wanted a party, I could find somewhere else to have one. That I was old enough to pay for my own celebrations. Which, in context, was the last straw. I stopped reminding them. No more mentions of my birthday, no hints about what I wanted. I built this armor around myself, telling friends I was doing a fundraiser or volunteering in India. That's why I was gone every year on my birthday. It was easier than admitting my family didn't care. People believed it. I believed it too. For a while. By 22, I was in my first real job. A cubicle farm where nobody knew my birthday. And that was fine. I felt more at home there than anywhere. I worked weekends so I could skip my birthday every year. I told a few select colleagues about the tradition, and they gave me a cake and sang to me. That one small group somehow made me feel more valid than my entire bloodline. I look back now and think, holy shit, the only time I ever got real support was from coworkers who barely knew me. College came and went. Jobs changed. I gave myself gifts. More than one. A car at 24. A trip to Europe at 25. That Christmas after turning 26, I splurged on a gaming setup. Each purchase, each breadcrumb I tossed myself, felt sweeter than anything Marla or Rick ever did. I imagined their surprise if they saw it. A PC with neon lights, an ergonomic chair that cost more than my first bike, monitors that curved like a giant smile. They'd scroll past it on social media and keep going. Still, every year at midnight, I'd glance at my phone, hoping, even though I knew it was pointless. Because at 30, the pattern never changed. Birthdays were a Wednesday or Friday. No one cared that I existed on those dates. I stopped blaming them. I blamed myself for letting it matter. Then I blamed them for not giving a shit. Being 35 means I forgot how much birthdays hurt. I woke up on my birthday this year and laughed. Laughed because I no longer expected anything. By then, I had Jules handling my legal stuff, and my tech startup was actually doing well. I'd met Tasha during a hospital visit after a panic episode. She remembered my birthday before I even told her the date and brought me a cookie with a candle. That fucking cookie was the best damn cake I'd ever had. So when Marla called on my birthday, finally, asking if she could stop by, I didn't jump. I listened. She said she was sorry, said she realized she'd been a shitty mom. Rick mouthed, "Hurry up," behind the phone when she paused. Danny texted, "Happy birthday, bro," with a kiss emoji, her first ever birthday text to me. And Chase left me a voicemail that was 3 sentences long. They sounded genuine enough. But I'd built something they couldn't access: boundaries. That afternoon, Jules called to remind me we needed final signatures on my updated will. I almost laughed into the phone. Updated will. I realized in that moment I'd never put them in it. Not even a small token. I never gave a damn before, but the thought of dropping them from my will was the high note to end this symphony of neglect. I flicked my wrist and said, "Sure, let's do it." I could almost hear the shock in Jules's voice, like I was about to erase my sister from existence. And I was. I rode the rest of the day like it was any other: coffee, emails, video calls, and not once hoping for a text. Because for the first time in my life, I'd made peace with being the only person I could rely on when it mattered. I used birthdays as deadlines. By age 19, I'd sworn off caring. By 22, I'd told myself I'd never need my family again. When I launched my first tech gig, I poured every ounce of frustration and every unspoken insult into code and investor pitches. Jules, my best friend since college, signed on as a lawyer and silent partner. He was the only person I trusted to know how I felt, partly because he actually asked me how my birthday was when I told him the date. The first year of real progress came when I rented a cramped office and hired 2 developers. I remember sitting in that fluorescent-lit room on my 23rd birthday, surrounded by keyboards and half-empty coffee cups. No cake, no cards, but I had a whiteboard full of project milestones and cash flow projections. It felt like home, and for the first time, my phone stayed silent, and I didn't mind. I had purpose. At 24, the company got its first major client, a regional startup with more ambition than budget. I celebrated by upgrading my laptop and buying a leather jacket I couldn't really afford. That jacket became my armor. Every time I walked into a pitch meeting, I shrugged it on like a middle finger to every "happy birthday, sweetheart" I'd never heard. Jules joked that I spent more on jackets than they ever spent on my celebrations. I laughed, but inside, I felt the old sting of neglect every time I zipped it up. By 25, word got around that I was the guy who built a useful app out of nothing. I started getting calls from old classmates and distant cousins, people I hadn't heard from since high school, asking how my business was going. They wanted insights, mentorship, even investment advice. I played nice, answered their emails, and forwarded the ones that asked for money directly to Jules's inbox. I never charged them, but I never offered help either. I was too busy building something real. In year 5, I met Tasha in the hospital lobby. I'd come in for panic attack treatment after another late-night code sprint. She recognized the exhausted look, sat down beside me with a paper cup of coffee, and asked if it was my birthday. I shook my head. She said she had to check the chart. When she found the date, she slipped back into the cafe, bought a plain sugar cookie, jammed a tiny candle into it, and brought it to me. She said, "Happy birthday," like it was the most natural thing in the world. That fucking cookie was the best damn cake I'd ever had. It was warm. It was unexpected. It carried zero obligation. No speeches, no cameras, no fake tears. Just one person remembering me because she cared, not because she had to. I texted Jules later, "This is what a birthday is supposed to feel like." He replied, "Hold on to that." After that, I realized I'd moved past missing out. I had Tasha, Jules, and a handful of old coworkers who threw me a small get-together every year. No balloons, no big speeches, just beer, pizza, and an offhand "here's to surviving another year." That was good enough. Still, my parents stayed in the background. They watched me on social media, a new office, a charity hackathon I sponsored, a magazine feature calling me one to watch. Each post was a silent notification. You exist. Remember that. I saw Marla's likes, Rick's occasional comment, "Proud of you, son," and for a moment, I thought maybe they'd changed. But the second I let my guard down, they'd revert to old habits. The real test came when Marla called one Tuesday morning. She asked if I could wire money to Rick's account. Said they had an unexpected car repair. She sounded genuinely apologetic, and desperate. I sat at my desk, just finished a client demo, and stared at her request. A few years ago, I'd have sent $100 without thinking. Not anymore. I asked how much. Marla named a round figure. I told her I'd send it after lunch. I hung up. My chest tightened. I had an appointment with a private notary that afternoon. Figured it was time to update my will. I opened my will file and scrolled through the beneficiaries. Jules, Tasha, my goddaughter Claire, my college roommate, who'd saved my laptop from a coffee spill. Their names were all there. My parents and siblings were nowhere. I stared at the screen. The realization hit me like a splash of ice water. I'd never put them in my will, not even out of guilt or habit. I never asked myself, what if something happens? Because I didn't believe they'd notice until it was too late. Now they'd call me needy again if I mentioned it. So I'd let them burn. I hit save and closed the document. Then I drafted an email to Jules. Confirm we can finalize this as is. No additions. He replied within minutes. Are you sure? You might want to talk first. I typed back. More talk isn't going to change a lifetime of blank calendars. Meanwhile, I scheduled an online call with Rick and Marla for later that day. In the invite, I wrote, family check-in. They RSVP'd immediately. I could almost hear their relief, like I'd finally let them back into my life. They wanted to discuss the money transfer, but I planned to bring it up later. That afternoon, I sat in my living room, lights turned down, laptop open. Jules was on video, no tie, just a blasé what's up. I told him I was ready. He walked me through the final steps, notarized signature, 2 witnesses, digital backup. We went over the list again. He read off every name. Not one of my blood relatives. He paused for effect. I said, that's the point. I felt both powerful and empty at the same time. Powerful because I was finally taking control of my story. Empty because something in me mourned the idea of a family that cared. But I told myself mourning was overrated. I had people who showed up. They deserved it more. By the time I wrapped up, I'd felt a shift. A line had been crossed. I wasn't just neglecting them back. I was making a statement. The next call with my parents would land with a thud. They wouldn't know what hit them. And for once, I wasn't going to apologize for it. That night, I sat on the balcony, sipped whiskey, and thought about the next birthday. No cupcakes unless I bought them. No invitations unless I sent them. For the first time, my birthday was mine, and I knew nobody could take that away. The panic attack hit me on a Tuesday afternoon. One minute I was reviewing code and investor emails. The next my vision tunneled, and my chest felt like it was on fire. I staggered from my desk, knocked over my coffee, and collapsed in the lobby of the co-working space. When I came to, I was hooked to a heart monitor in the hospital, Tasha's calm face looking down at me. She said I'd passed out from sheer stress. It sucked. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, a thought bloomed like an unwelcome party guest. What if I never woke up? That night, I called Jules. No panic in my voice, just a straight question. Can you make a death look real enough to fool my own family? He paused and asked if I was kidding. I told him to meet me first thing next morning at his office. I showed up with grim determination. Jules pulled out a folder he'd labeled, Operation Remember Ethan. We went through every detail. A staged collapse at the hospital with false paperwork, a coroner report drafted by a shady contact, an obituary written in perfect deadpan tone by Jules himself, and a low-key online grave listing. We even planned a memorial service at a chapel that booked him 3 weeks out. The plan was legally tight. No real fraud charges because nobody would suspect a will reading as a sham. We'd tip authorities later if needed, but for now, the goal was maximum emotional payoff. A week later, I enacted it. I checked into the same hospital wing, but this time I walked in with a cane and a fake oxygen monitor clipped to my finger. Jules coordinated with hospital security. His cousin owed him a favor. I collapsed in a hallway, paramedics swarmed, and I have rushed away. A real ambulance siren added theatrical flair. The next day, Jules released an official-looking statement and obituary to local papers. Within hours, social media lit up. Local tech was Ethan Johnson dies at 35. My phone stayed off. I slept in a friend's spare room. Meanwhile, the funeral home called, saying they'd picked up my body. Jules told them it was all set. I pictured my family scrambling, crying, arranging travel, and buying black clothes. They'd finally remember me. Only now, they'd be remembering a corpse. I watched the chaos unfold through a burner account. First, Marla posted a barely legible status. "Can't believe you're gone, baby boy. Rest in peace." It got 13 likes. Rick commented under it, "Miss you more than you know." Then Danny posted a selfie at the funeral home steps with a pouty face and "so sad" as the caption. Chase flew in with a blurry Instagram story, "Family forever." All that performative grief made me grin, even though it was dripping with hypocrisy. When the chapel filled for the memorial, it wasn't grief that struck me. It was the entitlement. People parked in the reserved spots, whispering about inheritance. One cousin joked about the fortune Ethan left behind. That's when I realized this was bigger than I'd planned. The payoff had grown teeth. Jules handed me the will packet 2 nights before the service. It listed all the beneficiaries, none of my relatives. He'd added specific letters for each. Marla got one detailing every forgotten birthday. Rick got one listing every time he dismissed my feelings as drama. Danny's letter called her out for celebrating others while ignoring me. And Chase's letter mocked his 3-sentence voicemail. My friends, Tasha, my goddaughter Claire, everyone who'd remembered made the cut. On the morning of the service, I dressed in the funeral parlor's back room. Black suit, white shirt, no tie. I looked at myself in the mirror and thought, holy shit, I actually did this. I slipped into a side door as mourners arrived, stashing my phone with Jules's assistant. Then I sat in the back pew, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. When the minister droned on about cherished memories, I felt nothing but anticipation. I'd been through worse anxiety than this, collapsing in a code sprint, running on 3 hours of sleep. This was just another challenge. Jules took the podium for the will reading. He cleared his throat and said, "Ethan asked me to read his final wishes to you." Marla sniffled dramatically. Danny dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Rick gripped the back of a pew like it was a life raft. Chase tapped his foot. Jules read each clause. Everything went to people who gave a damn. He handed out the personal letters. Marla's hands shook so hard she dropped hers. Danny shrieked. Chase lunged toward the podium until a usher held him back. Rick turned red, his tie choking him. The room felt electric. My heart pounded, not from nerves, but from pure triumph. Then Jules said, "And now, there's one more request." He stepped aside. The doors at the front of the chapel swung open, and I walked in. Alive. Well, smiling like the asshole I am. Silence exploded. No applause. No tears. Just shocked gasps and dropped jaws. Marla stared as if seeing a ghost. Rick looked ready to swing. Danny dropped her tissue and ran for the exit. Chase tensed, like he'd pick a fight, but then froze. I took off my glasses and said, "Surprise." No big speech. No apology. Just one word. Someone whispered, "He's alive." Someone else yelled, "What the hell?" I felt the tension and savored it. They realized not only had they been played, but they'd been cut out of my life and my will. The hypocrisy bled through every face in that chapel, faces that only showed up when they thought I was dead and had money. I said, "Thanks for coming." Then I turned and walked out. Not angry, not triumphant, just done. Outside, Jules handed me my phone. I turned it on. 50 missed calls. 100 texts. Voicemails begging for forgiveness. "We love you, come home." I didn't answer. I tucked the phone in my pocket and walked to my car. In the back seat was a box with a cupcake for each of my chosen family. I drove to Tasha's place, knocked on her door, and let myself in. My real celebration was waiting. And in that moment, I felt like my real birthday had finally arrived. I arrived at the chapel early, dressed sharp but calm. The space smelled like polished wood and cheap flowers. Rows of chairs were half filled with relatives in black dresses and suits, all pretending they cared. I sat in the back, mask in place, nursing a bottled water. I felt nothing but anticipation. After everything they forgot, this was the moment they'd finally remember me, if only for the inheritance. Jules strutted up to the front, cleared his throat, and scanned the room. "Thank you all for coming," he said, voice steady. Ethan wanted me to read his final wishes. Marla sniffled loudly. Danny dabbed her eyes. Rick leaned forward, elbows on his knees, like he was waiting for auctioneers to drop the gavel. Chase shifted uncomfortably in his seat, as if he might bolt at any second. Classic. The will began with small tokens, a necklace to Claire, my goddaughter, a trust fund for Tasha's nursing school, shares in the company for Jules, a donation to the panic attack fund that saved me in crisis. Those were the easy parts, the ones nobody in my bloodline would notice. Then came the big one. All remaining assets, including the family home and all liquid investments, are to be distributed among the following, and Jules read out names. No Marla, no Rick, no Danny, no Chase. I watched Marla's lip quiver, then she coughed to hide it. Rick straightened up, eyes narrowing. Chase backed away from his neighbor on the pew. Danny let out a strangled sob. A few cousins gasped. I stifled a grin. Watching them scramble for air felt better than any birthday cake I'd ever had. Jules paused and handed out sealed letters. Ethan also asked me to read personal notes, he said. He opened Marla's letter first. Dear Mom, he read. Remember when I was 10 and you dropped a burnt cupcake on the table and left? You never asked how I felt. You picked Danny's party, not mine. You forgot I was your son. I hope this letter reminds you how it feels to be ignored. Marla's face turned red. She dropped the letter, scrunched her eyes shut, then fanned her face with tissue. Rick leaned over to comfort her, but she waved him off. Another letter came for Rick. Dad, you called me too sensitive at 16 and told me to pay for my own parties. You have a habit of dismissing feelings. You're great at financial advice, shitty at empathy. Rick's jaw twitched. They passed the letters down the pews. Chase's note called out his 3-sentence voicemail and blamed him for never standing up when Marla and Rick ignored me. Danny's note reminded her of every time she flaunted her parties on social media while I sat alone. Each letter stung with precision. Each word was revenge, served cold. The room fell silent. It felt like the air was draining out. I sat forward, drinking it in. Then Jules looked up. And now, one final surprise. He stepped aside as the chapel door swung open. I walked forward, removing my mask. I kept my head down, letting the gasp ripple through the crowd. I reached the podium. No grand entrance needed. I said, surprise. My voice was soft but carried. The silence broke into whispers of he's alive and what the hell. Marla clutched her chest. Rick stared like he'd seen a ghost. Chase blinked twice. Danny dropped her letter, stumbling out. I took a breath. I staged my death, I said. It wasn't fraud. It was a test. A way to see who actually gave a shit. Turns out, none of you did until you thought I was gone and rich. I didn't wait for them to protest. I said, this was never about money. It was about respect. You earn nothing. A cousin shouted, you can't do this. Another yelled, we're family. I leaned on the podium. Family doesn't forget your birthday for 20 years. My eyes scanned the assembled faces. You showed up for my funeral expecting cash. You dropped out of my life when I mattered. I dropped you from mine. Rick stood. His voice wavered. Ethan, this is cruel. I shrugged. Crueler than forgetting your son's birthdays? Sorry, I can't relate. A tangle of indignation and shame spread across his face. Marla tried for tears. Her mascara ran. Chase stepped forward, like he'd finally found his spine, but stopped at the aisle. Danny turned her back and fled. Jules gave me a nod. I closed the folder of letters and wills, tapped the papers together. And that's it. I turned and walked out, letting the door close behind me. No applause. No tears. Just their choked sobs and angry whispers. In the lobby, I found my phone buzzing with texts from co-workers and friends. Congrats on launching your new product. Can't wait to celebrate with you tomorrow. Tasha's name popped up with a cupcake emoji. I smiled. This was the real life I'd built. People who showed up. Outside, RVs and limousines waited. Family cars idled, engines humming. But I got into my own car, the one I'd bought for myself last year. As I drove off, I saw Marla rush out of the chapel, crying. Rick standing by her side, looking lost. Chase pacing. Danny sobbing in the back seat of a black sedan. They were stuck in that chapel, grappling with their mistakes. I didn't look back. My phone pinged again. Happy birthday, Ethan. It was Tasha. I typed back, see you tonight. I gripped the wheel and whispered, finally, my birthday. I knew the fallout would be messy. Lawsuits, threats, guilt trips. I dodged them all. Because for the first time, I felt in control. My birthday had always been my day. Now, it was my victory. I parked outside Tasha's apartment and took a deep breath. The night air was cool, and for once, I wasn't jittery. I had done everything I planned. I'd staged my death, watched my family's hypocrisy on full display, read my letters, and walked out of a funeral that was more revealing than any birthday party. Now, it was time for the real celebration. I carried a small box into the lobby, stepped into Tasha's building, and made my way up the stairs. My phone buzzed with messages from Jules and Claire, my goddaughter, all asking where to meet. I unlocked her door, and the scene hit me like a shot of adrenaline. Pizza boxes stacked on the coffee table, empty beer bottles on the counter, houseplants glowing under string lights. My chosen family had gathered without fanfare, just because they cared. Tasha looked up from the kitchen and smiled. "Happy birthday," she said, placing a simple vanilla cupcake with a single candle on the table. No frosting overkill, no professional photographer. Just a cupcake and a candle that reminded me of that first one Tasha ever gave me in the hospital. Jules gave me a mock salute. "Mr. Johnson, permission to celebrate." I rolled my eyes but felt a warmth I hadn't felt with Marla's cardboard cupcake. Claire ran over, handed me a hand-drawn card with a crooked "Happy Birthday, Ethan" inside. Danny's drawing, Claire's mother, was a scribble of me with a superhero cape. I laughed out loud, the sound raw and real. We sat around the table, and for once, nobody checked their phones. We toasted whiskey glasses and sang off-key. I didn't need a party of 20 or a live stream to prove my worth. I needed these people who actually showed up. We shared stories, work wins, embarrassing moments, plans for the future. There was no tension, no hidden agendas. Just genuine company. After we ate, I blew out the candle. The flame flickered, then died. It symbolized something more than another year lived. It was the end of a long wait. I closed my eyes and thought of every empty birthday I'd endured. Every ignored plea for happy birthday. Every time I'd convinced myself they loved me. All of it faded behind the warmth of this room. I opened my eyes and said, "Thank you." Simple words, but waited. Tasha hugged me. Claire jumped on my lap. Jules slapped me on the back. I felt solid, rooted like never before. This was my victory lap. Later, I drafted a quick update to my will. I added a small fund for future birthdays. Maybe not a party, but a cupcake for each person who cared. It felt right. I never planned to invite Marla or Rick. They'd gotten their lesson. My birthday was no longer a demand or a test. It was a celebration I controlled. At midnight, we stepped onto the small balcony. The city lights flickered below. I held Claire's hand as she stared out, eyes wide. "Can I do this every year?" she asked. I smiled and nodded. "Every year." We counted down, then shouted "Happy Birthday, Ethan," again, the night echoing with our laughter. For once, the day felt like it belonged to me, and that feeling was sweeter than any inheritance drama. The next morning, my phone woke me up at 7 a.m. It was a flurry of muted notifications. Jules had sent a news clipping. An online tabloid picked up the stunt, calling it the most savage birthday revenge ever. Comments ranged from legend to heartless. I sipped my coffee, scrolling through the headlines. Some articles praised my creativity, others decried the cruelty. But nobody asked me for a statement. I was fine with that. I texted Jules, "I'm unbothered." He replied with a gif of a cat sprawled on a throne. I laughed. Then, I noticed 5 missed calls from my parents. No voicemails, just silent calls. I let them go to voicemail. In the quiet that followed, I realized something. The absence of contact felt freeing, not painful. This morning, I owed nobody an apology or explanation. Later, I opened the kitchen drawer and found the cupcake wrapper from last night. It lay on the counter next to the candle's burnt wick. I picked it up and traced a finger over the crumpled foil. This small piece of trash carried more meaning than a dozen sloppy birthday parties ever would. It was proof I belonged somewhere. Across the city, my old home sat empty. No new beneficiaries, no inheritance drama. It belonged to people who made it feel like home. I thought of Claire starting her scholarship, of Tasha's promotion tomorrow morning, of Jules launching his next case. My legacy wasn't an estate. It was the lives I actually touched. I drafted a birthday email to my team at work, thanking them for their support. I CC'd Tasha and Claire. I wrote a brief, dry joke about my unexpected funeral rehearsal. The replies came fast. "Congratulations, belly laughs. Glad you're alive, boss." It was the first corporate email I'd ever sent with genuine affection behind it. By mid-afternoon, I was in my living room, sketching potential upgrades to my office space. Maybe a rooftop patio. Maybe that ergonomic chair upgrade. I used my birthday fund mentally, planning how to spoil myself next year. Not because I needed more stuff, but because I deserved to plan something without guilt. I'd earned that. The final test was seeing a birthday post from Rick on LinkedIn. They're weird, but he used a heart emoji. Usually, I delete those notifications, but today I left it there, blinking on my phone. Next year, I'd decide whether to acknowledge it. Right now, I don't care. That decision was mine. That night, before bed, I wrote in my journal, a habit I'd picked up during college. I thanked myself for finally drawing a line, for staging a death that revealed the truth, and for choosing the kind of people I wanted in my life. It was more than a birthday reflection. It was a commitment to never go back to the old me. I turned off the lamp. The city hum faded as sleep took over. For once, birthdays meant something real, not empty promises or forgotten dates. My candle had burned down hours ago, but its glow remained in my mind. Tomorrow would be another day, work, meetings, code sprints, but today was the day I found freedom. In the silence, I thought, "Happy birthday, Ethan." This time, it was heartfelt.